On my son's birthday, Nancy took him and my brother to Iceland to see the northern lights. That night, I signed the divorce papers and left. 3 years later, a kid hugged my leg at the airport. "Dad, don't you want me and Mom anymore?" I looked at the woman with teary eyes behind the kid and said coldly, "You got the wrong person." Hearing this, Harry couldn't hold back and burst into tears. "You are Dad. You are. I'm not mistaken." With people coming and going at the airport, I ended up being quite the spectacle. My dance team buddy Becky looked around awkwardly, more embarrassed than I was. Nancy stepped forward, pulling Harry away, her usual calm and cool demeanor back in place. "Harry, stop making trouble." Harry, tears streaming down his face, turned to look at his mom with a red nose. "Mom, it is Dad. I found Dad." Wearing sunglasses, only half my cold face was visible. My distant gaze fell on them, making Nancy avoid my eyes. "He's not. You got it wrong," she said in a muted voice. Harry stood there, stunned, confused by my denial. Nancy, holding his hand, apologized with a smile. I couldn't care less about her apology and brushed off the spot where Harry had touched me, then boarded the plane with my team. It had been 3 years since I left. I never expected to run into my ex-wife and son at a foreign airport. I denied any connection without hesitation. Everyone thought I'd been mistaken for someone else by a random kid hugging my leg. The incident spread through the dance team. They teased me endlessly. "Fangirls, I get. But baby fans? Seriously? Tim, your fan base is more varied than I expected," Becky joked, having witnessed the drama. "You can't deny that kid does look a bit like Tim," someone said, showing off a photo. Everyone curiously gathered around, gasping shortly after. "Wait, isn't this the young master?" I was just getting over the shock of running into my ex, and now here we were talking about this familiar name, making my eyelids twitch again. Everyone's gossip instincts kicked in. The person with the phone started filling everyone in. Words like elite, heiress, and young lady floated in. Everyone was whispering amazedly. They even found photos taken by paparazzi from before and compared them with Harry's airport pictures. It was true. "Tim, look." Becky was shocked. I forced a smile, pretending not to care. Some pitied me for missing such a chance, while others focused elsewhere. "So why's the young master mistaking dads? Where's his real dad?" "No idea. Heard Nancy doesn't get along with her husband," someone whispered. "Rumor has it they divorced years ago but kept it under wraps, probably true." "Huh? Oh, that kid must feel awful, losing his dad at such a young age." "Pity? Not sure. I thought of Nancy's many male friends. Lots of people wanted to be Harry's dad. He wasn't lacking in that department. Nancy's always been known as a bit of a flirt. I've known her forever. Those charming eyes could make would look romantic. She was bold and daring, standing out from the crowd. All the boys she flirted with from kindergarten through high school fell for her. She dated university nerds to hot stars. Her taste varied. Longest was 3 months, shortest 2 weeks. But she never liked someone like me, who grew up with her. When asked why, Nancy said, "Being with Tim is the same as being with my right hand." Then why marry him? My marriage to Nancy wasn't about love. It was about family interests. By Nancy's logic, knowing her marriage and love life were just family game pieces, she decided to live boldly. After all, eventually she'd have to marry Tim. So why not date a few more before tying the knot? "You better be careful. Tim might leave you one day," friends cautioned. Nancy let out a laugh, hard to define if it was confidence or a taunt. Nancy's quite the wild spirit. Even with our engagement, I couldn't change her. I remember one year she had a cruise party with male models in Victoria Harbor, and it got online. Her wild lifestyle quickly sparked a discussion. Family pressures forced me to go bring Nancy back, as the company's stocks hit turbulence. When I got there, the model with her looked intrigued. Holding her, he cheekily asked, "Nancy, who's this guy?" "My fiancé," she said. The model widened her eyes. "You're marrying this stiff guy?" From childhood, I was raised around elite manners. My moves were precise and meticulous. Nancy told me the same thing about being stiff, but I maintained my calm. "Go back with me," I told Nancy. Before Nancy answered, the model butted in. Hasn't anyone told you, sir? Never kill a woman's vibe when she's happy. I ignored him. Knowing Nancy forever, I knew guys like him were plenty. Few ever made it to the next day before disappearing from her life for good. Nancy, I called her name. Nancy pinched the cheek of the boy pouting in her arms from my lack of response. Should I go back? She asked playfully. The boy eyed me and pushed a full glass of red wine in front of me. If he drinks, you can go. Nancy said nothing, her gaze on me with a cheeky grin. That's the default meaning. Actually, I've had a pretty privileged life, so I'm a good match for Nancy. I've never really faced any hardships. Except when it comes to Nancy, it's like my dignity gets dragged through the mud. I remembered what they said on the way here. I clenched my fist, but ended up downing that glass of red wine in one go. Cough, 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 cough. I choked and my eyes turned red, stubbornly staring at Nancy. I finished it. Now come with me. Nancy chuckled. Why are you being so obedient? She reached over to wipe the wine off the corner of my lips, and I dodged. Nancy paused, then let out a dismissive laugh. She shoved the guy off her. Let's go. I've handled plenty of situations like this. Back then, I felt like an NPC going through a script. After the divorce, it was like I broke free from the storyline. I felt like a drowning person grabbing onto driftwood. Reborn. I think Nancy might feel the same way, without someone boring and strict like me holding her back. Her life must be going pretty well. I quickly put my encounter with Nancy behind me. But the dance troupe folks, maybe 'cause the training's so dull. They rarely get fresh gossip, so their attention is all on that. One day, the director suddenly brought a group to visit the theater. Nancy was surrounded in the middle like a star. The dance troupe immediately recognized her as the center of gossip these days. They excitedly nudged each other. The director introduced in English. This is our rehearsal room. These are our troupe members. And this is our principal dancer, Tim, he's Japanese. Nancy wore a sharp suit, exuding power. Gone were those awkward moments of our reunion and her usual flamboyance. Her charming eyes had grown steady and commanding after years in the business world. Quickly looked away, indifferent. I didn't want too much interaction with Nancy. Hoped she'd ignore me like at the airport. But unexpectedly, Nancy's playful voice came through. I know he's my husband. Before Nancy joined the troupe, everyone was curious about her. But the biggest question was always, who is Nancy's husband? I'm not like Nancy, who shows up in tabloids every other day. Even getting married and having kids, I kept it low-key. My hidden identity got exposed by Nancy's teasing remark. Everyone was shocked to realize the gossip target was right beside them. Their looks towards me turned awkward and bewildered. 'Cause before Nancy spoke, they were excited. Peter, he's been watching you. They thought it was the start of something romantic. Didn't expect it to be a reunion signal. Leaving the troupe, I saw Nancy by her black car downstairs. She looked like she was merging with the night. Seeing me, Nancy's eyes lit up, smiling as she called out, Tim. Her tone was warm and natural. It felt like the 3-year separation was just an illusion. I didn't stop and she tried to pull me. Slap. Get lost. I said coldly. Nancy, turning her head from the impact, looked surprised, but her smile stayed. Tim's got a temper now, even hitting people. I glared at her coldly. But Nancy asked me, you calmed down yet? Come back with me. Tim, I miss you. Her voice turned soft and tender. See, that's what she's like. Troublesome and reckless. Even though she messed up, she makes it look like I'm the unreasonable one. Nancy, we're divorced. I reminded her. I didn't sign, it's not finalized. She seemed to play coy. I took a deep breath. Doesn't matter, we've been separated 2 years. I can file. Nancy's face finally changed. Her eyes darkened. Tim, must it be this way? I gave her a cold smile and walked away. I tried to ignore Nancy's presence. But over the next few days, she kept appearing. She'd find excuses to see my troupe's performances or wait at the theater for me after work. It's really annoying. Back when we were married, she was never home. Wouldn't even tell me when she was traveling. Just fly off with some flirty company. Now Nancy seems so free. constantly bothering her ex. What's her game? I didn't want to focus on Nancy, but people kept bringing her news to my attention. When Becky came over hesitantly, I was focused on preparing for the next performance rehearsal. Tim, who's this Peter? What's up with him and Nancy? It had been a while since I'd heard that name. I hesitated for a moment. Becky showed me her phone. That's when I got it. Yesterday, Nancy didn't show up. She went to an auction. Spent a crazy amount of $100 million on a pair of cufflinks. Media reported it, and online folks were speculating who they were for. Domestic popular star Peter posted a tweet afterwards. Seemed to subtly hint the cufflinks were a gift from Nancy. Curious gossipers then looked into Peter. Discovered he's now a top celeb, backed by Nancy, and allegedly has a special connection with her. Since media had once caught Peter and Nancy traveling together. Even used the phrase like a family of three in the headline. Since the troupe learned about my identity and reconsidered the rumors heard before, they couldn't help but feel concerned and sympathetic for me. After practice, I saw Nancy waiting at the theater door again. She was still as self-centered as ever. Despite being turned down a few times, she still acted like she wouldn't take no for an answer. With gossip about her and Peter everywhere lately, she seemed oblivious. I've reserved us a spot at that French restaurant you wanted to try. Let's go together. After Nancy found me, she quickly got a handle on my lifestyle over the years. She always used those tricks on boyfriends or little birds. While eating, Nancy handed me a box. I found something yesterday, thought it might suit you, she said. I opened it up. It was the ridiculously expensive cufflink from the auction. Turns out you didn't give this to Peter, I said sarcastically. Hearing that name, Nancy frowned slightly. He doesn't deserve it. She responded with a hint of disgust in her voice. I found it amusing. Weren't you quite fond of him before? I asked. This was the first time Nancy and I had sat down and talked so calmly since reuniting. Peter's name was being brought up between us for the first time in years. When I first got married, I intended to just get along politely with Nancy. I knew she was passionate about giving every guy in the world a home, so I had already picked my place in her life. As long as Nancy didn't bring those guys around to irritate me, I wouldn't say much. Until she got involved with Peter. Peter was my brother. From middle school through college, we were best friends. He knew all my secrets. At my wedding, he was my best man, and when I was sick, he was the one who took care of me. But in the end, he and Nancy betrayed me. On Harry's second birthday, Peter came to celebrate. Hey, Harry, let Uncle give you a hug, he said, holding Harry and revealing a fresh hickey and an expensive watch. I was a bit taken aback. Peter, did you start dating someone? I asked. Peter blushed and nodded. Who's the lucky lady? You haven't mentioned her, I pressed. It's not public yet, Peter answered. By that time, he was in showbiz and gaining some popularity. I knew relationships could impact his career. So, despite my surprise, I didn't ask more. Deep down, I was happy Peter had found someone. Bring her out to meet us when you can, I suggested. Just then, Nancy finally walked in. What's so exciting? She asked. Nancy was 26 at the time, shedding her wild youth. She was becoming more like an heir. The media even reported how she'd settled down, sometimes attending events with me. Peter has a girlfriend now, I said. Can't be the best man, but Harry could be the ring bearer. What do you think? Nancy smiled softly and took Harry from Peter. Peter smiled too. I thought they had agreed. In hindsight, it was all just ironic. As Peter's career soared, many detractors called him privileged. I, being his devoted friend, often defended him online. I didn't want him seeing the negative comments and getting upset. People think you have someone backing you. How smart. They somehow know your biggest benefactor is me, I joked. There was silence on Peter's end, and I grew worried. Peter? Low laughter came from the other side, mingled with something indescribable. Thanks, Tim, I'm good, he replied. Though surprised, I finished our call, that's good. Don't worry. If you need help, Nancy's PR team can step in. Okay. Click, the call ended. Soon after, his negative press vanished. A year later, Peter shot to fame with a hit show. The show won an award with Nancy as a sponsor. I asked her for a spot as an award presenter, under the guise of supporting my buddy on such an important day. On stage, I hugged him and the trophy. Congrats. Is your girlfriend here? I asked. Peter gave a sly smile and hugged me back. Yeah, she's in the audience, he said. Afterwards, I scanned the crowd. What are you looking for? Nancy inquired. Peter's girlfriend. Heard she's here today. Nancy paused while covering my lap with my jacket. Don't be so curious. I really shouldn't have been curious. I never did meet Peter's girlfriend. Only through social media where he flaunted her gift-giving did I glimpse her existence. Until Peter's birthday. I called, asking how he wanted to celebrate. Sorry, man. I'm filming that day so I can't meet up, he said. Disappointed, I hung up. Just then, Nancy texted she'd be away on business, and the kid had already returned home. With nothing to do, I decided to surprise Peter, to fuel our decade-old friendship. That night, I went to Peter's apartment where he rested between shoots. In the silence and darkness, I saw two figures entangled and heard intimate breathing. I bought new lingerie, wait till you see it, said Nancy with Peter. 3 days later, I was on a plane back home. Nancy covered me with a blanket. She mentioned the media was at the airport for photos. Seeing my cold face, she squeezed my hand. Tim, you should smile. Just 3 days ago, Nancy straightforwardly expressed her intentions. She wanted me back. These past 3 years, I've been telling people you're away on further studies. But Tim, you can't just stay gone forever. Those paparazzi really have nothing better to do. They've written countless stories about me and Nancy having relationship issues. Nancy can't keep a lid on them all. Why bother hiding it? Isn't it the truth? I sneered. Next month is Harry's birthday. He's old enough to understand things now. I don't want him growing up in a broken home. You can marry a new guy, and she can have a new dad, whether it's a sparrow she raises or Peter, I don't care. Nancy's eyes flickered, and she looked away. You're not like them, she said. Those were her exact words. I scowled fiercely. I wasn't willing to go back home, but Nancy always has her ways. I know you like the dance troupe here. You can still dance after returning. You can even take your troupe mates with you, she tried persuading me. But she threatened me with my dance companions' jobs. I slapped her across the face. Nancy, you're disgusting. Nancy laughed it off. Tim, don't hurt your hand. Then she pleaded, come back with me, Tim. I finally understood she was determined this time. My knuckles turned white from gripping so tightly. I compromised, I can go back, but I have a condition. What is it? She asked. If you just need a stable marriage as a front for your business, we can agree to maintain appearances. Later, you sign and we divorce without going public. Nancy stared at me intently. What if I don't agree? Her voice was slow and strained. I looked back at her coolly and raised my left wrist. Then I can choose to escape or choose death. As soon as she saw the deep scar, her face went pale, and pain flashed in her eyes. Nancy, there are 365 days in a year. You can't watch me all the time. Nancy finally gave in. After getting off the plane, we walked through an elaborately arranged passage together. By the time I was back, pictures of Nancy and I close together had made it to the front page. Nancy seemed quite pleased, chatting excitedly on the way home. The house is all ready just like before. The garden's full of tulips now. Weren't you really into them? She talked a lot and it got on my nerves. Seeing my closed eyes and frown, she stopped and carefully adjusted the blanket over me. Once home, I saw Harry. He was dressed neatly, holding the butler's hand, a little anxious beside the ornate iron gate. When he saw me get out of the car, those eyes like black grapes lit up. Dad! I got caught off guard as he hugged my leg tightly, looking up at me with shiny eyes. You're finally back. This time, I really took a good look at him. When I left, he was just 4. Now he'd grown a bit, looking like a little young man. He is my kid. I should love him. But now, I held back the urge to hug him, just patted his head casually. You've grown taller, Harry. Even with such a small gesture, Harry was thrilled. I got you a gift, Dad. He pulled out a little gift box, but I didn't take it. His once expectant smile faded, looking anxious and uneasy. Nancy stepped in. Harry, Dad just got back and is tired. Let him rest first. Oh, okay. The house was exactly as Nancy said, unchanged. Like when I left. The vase in the living room hadn't moved, the little trinkets on the table still there. I remembered Nancy griping about how childish and not her taste they were. Yet she'd kept them after I left. Then, in the master bedroom, I saw the wedding photo I had smashed now perfectly restored on the wall. I paused for a moment. Beside me, Nancy's expression turned tense. Her fists clenched subtly, thinking I might say something. But I stayed silent. Then, her anticipation turned to disappointment. Worried I might not adjust, Nancy personally instructed the butler on my changed tastes and habits over the years. Harry stood nearby, watching me eagerly yet nervously. I slept off the jet lag, waking up at noon the next day to overheard conversations downstairs. It was Peter. I just returned, and there he was. He sat casually on the sofa, talking to the butler as if he owned the place. Hearing footsteps, he looked up. His handsome gaze lingered for a few seconds. Then he smiled. "Tim, you're back?" I ignored Peter. The butler, who'd just spoken to him, came up respectfully. "Sir, you're awake? I'll have them prepare your meal." Peter seemed taken aback by my disregard for him, then walked casually over. "Tim," he said. His eyes paused on my wrist for a second. I was wearing the watch Nancy got me. Reporters had seen it yesterday. Some nosy gossipers even zoomed in on it, posting the photo alongside Peter's ambiguous tweet. Their article questioned why a watch supposedly bought for a young starlet was on someone else. Netizens pounced on Peter over the ordeal. Didn't someone say this watch was a gift from the CEO to a certain someone? How come someone else has it? Haha, someone can't stop riding the wave of fame. He's just an actor, thinking he can cozy up to the boss. Hot knowledge. Peter and Nancy's husband were once close. Cold knowledge. Peter likes the CEO. Wow, is it true? Shameless. Stealing a brother's wife. The incident blew up on Twitter that day. Peter's fans couldn't defend him quick enough, jumping into online arguments. Which I saw Peter ever say the watch was for him. I'm so done with you people who twist things around. It's folks like you that make the internet such a toxic place. What do you mean snatching a brother's wife? Everyone knows our Peter is little Master Harry's godfather. You guys can turn a close relationship into rumors. I'm just done with you all. With all the growing buzz, Peter just couldn't hold it in anymore. He posted another tweet. "Sorry for taking up your time, but I'm really sorry you misunderstood." But not many people seemed to care about his statement. Most netizens were still bashing him, saying he shouldn't lay claim to things that aren't his. I can't see Peter's face at that moment, but knowing him, he probably didn't sleep well last night. Yet, bless his heart, he still showed up here this morning. I'm just slowly eating my breakfast. Peter still has a smile on his face. "Tim, we haven't seen each other in 3 years, and you're just as handsome as ever." Honestly, I gotta hand it to Peter. With all that happened, he can still stand in front of me pretending nothing happened. "Really? But you look more unbearable than ever." Peter's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. His eyes were teary and apologetic. "It's been 3 years. Are you still mad at me?" Before he could finish, he let out a sharp scream. Milk drips down his face, soaking his clothes. Peter looked at me, shocked and in disbelief. "Can you just shut up? You're making me sick." A look of anger flashed in Peter's eyes. I turned to my butler. "Is the guest system in this villa so slack anyone can wander in?" The butler mumbled, too afraid to answer. I grew more annoyed. "Get him out of here. I've lost my appetite for breakfast." "Yes." The butler approached Peter. "Mr. Nancy, please." "Tim, who are you to kick me out?" Peter couldn't keep his celebrity poise any longer, speaking up in anger. "It's hilarious. This is my home. I'm the man of the house. Do I need a reason to ask someone to leave?" I finally looked Peter in the eye. "If you won't leave, should I?" Then, my gaze shifted past him. "Nancy, you say?" Peter's face changed, quickly turning around. "Nancy, I'm not." But seeing the empty doorway behind him, he stopped short. He turned back at me, filled with fury. "Playing tricks on me? I couldn't help but chuckle at him. Peter was even angrier now. His face seemed twisted with rage. I got up from the dining table and headed upstairs, while telling the butler to bring a new breakfast later, and telling him to throw away the carpet and sofa he touched. I find them dirty. Yes. Behind me, Peter's eyes felt as if they could pierce through me. As if I care, I'm here to make sure he finds life worse than death this time. Peter left humiliated and defeated. By the afternoon, the incident reached Nancy's ears. But when she saw the changed sofa and carpet, she didn't ask a thing. She only stopped me when I entered the room, explaining, "I didn't know he'd come by. When you left, Harry kept crying. He was the one who helped calm down." I shrugged off her hand, bored. "You don't need to explain. It's not 3 years ago. I don't care about this stuff." Nancy's hand froze, and the color drained from her face instantly. After a moment, she retreated, looking defeated. A few days later, Harry came to find me. He stood behind a garden pillar, sneaking peeks at me again and again. But he still couldn't muster the courage to come closer. This had been going on for days. I noticed right from the start. Today, finally, I set my book down and turned to him. "What's up?" Harry glanced around. Once he was sure I was talking to him, he carefully walked over. "Dad," I responded with silence. Harry gathered his courage. "Dad, will you make a cake with me?" I looked at him, curious. Harry continued, "I want to make my birthday cake with you and Mom. His birthday is next week. A world-class pastry chef is already designing and working on that cake." I thought for a moment, then agreed. Sure. That afternoon, when Nancy got back, Harry and I were in the kitchen whipping cream. A pastry chef was guiding us. Harry's little face focused hard on his dough. "What are you doing?" Nancy asked. A maid answered for us. Barely after the answer left her lips, Harry called out to her, "Mom, come help me bake the cake." Nancy paused a bit, instinctively looking my way. Seeing me quietly agreeing, her voice brightened. "Okay." By the time we finished, it was 4 p.m. The chef looked at our completed cake. "Now, let's all three of you add the final touches to the cake." Harry picked up a piping bag. I guided his small hand, and he turned to look at me, eyes bright. He then glanced at Nancy behind me. Nancy quietly extended her hand to mine, testing the waters. Noticing me not pulling away, she held me tighter. The final touches looked beautiful. Harry was thrilled. He ate 2 pieces, claiming this cake was the sweetest in the world. "For my birthday, I'll make another one. The most awesome sweet." For Harry's birthday this year, the company had a special video made and displayed it on the largest LED screen in the city to celebrate. They also invited some business elites to join, and some media journalists tagged along. Harry had birthdays before, but never as grand and lavish as this. Unless Nancy planned it. Because it's more than Harry's birthday. It's also our first public reunion as a family of 3 in 3 years. You could tell she really valued this birthday celebration. On the day of Harry's birthday, elites from all circles gathered. Besides the invited journalists, paparazzi tried to get in for a scoop. So everyone was hanging around outside the villa. Some even started live streaming. The hype went through the roof. But pretty soon, people realized Peter wasn't invited. Isn't Peter supposed to be the godfather of the little prince? Why didn't he show up? He wasn't invited. Huh? Ha ha ha. Seriously? Who started the rumor that Peter is the godfather anyway? Do people really fall for that stuff? Come on. Everyone's forgetting that photo from 4 years ago with Nancy and her son. Exactly. The 3 of them looking at the northern lights in Iceland. If they weren't close, why would they go together? Online, people were arguing wildly. Peter's fans tried to save face, claiming he was busy filming and mentioned he was grateful for the invite. But then, the man himself showed up at the villa entrance. See? I knew Peter would show up for the little prince's birthday as his godfather. The fans quickly switched their tune. I saw Peter then. He was squatting in front of Harry, handing over the gift he prepared. "Harry, see what I got for you?" Harry had no idea about the past. He happily accepted Peter's gift. Peter saw me and gave a perfectly measured smile as he walked over. Tim, he spoke just loud enough for only the two of us to hear. To others, it looked like we were still cool with each other. He chatted with me, smiling warmly. I know you don't want to see me, but I still came. But you're leaving soon, right? I laughed as I replied. Peter's face changed. Turns out, Nancy noticed him. Nancy looked quite pissed. She didn't expect Peter to show up uninvited. But since it was Harry's birthday, she held back. She just gave the security a look, planning to have them escort him out. Peter was once treated with respect because he was my friend. Who would have thought he'd get kicked out in public someday? Right before being dragged away, Peter grabbed me angrily. Tim, I just wanted to celebrate Harry's birthday. Was that necessary? Harry grew up with me around. I genuinely care about him. Really? I stared at him. Your genuine care means trying to take my place? Back then, you even wanted my wife. Who knows if you'd want my son too? So this is your revenge. Peter looked at me, full of resentment. You know how hard I worked to get here. Now you have Nancy take away my resources. How could you do this to me? Peter accused. Only then did I realize why Peter showed up uninvited. It was a risky move. After he left the villa that day, I reclaimed the resources that were poured on him. Fans haven't noticed anything yet, but insiders already heard the news. Peter, having come this far, wouldn't let his efforts go to waste. He riskily came to Harry's birthday party, to squash rumors and, as fans guessed, to chase some clout. What's been so tough? I laughed at him. Didn't I help you get into the industry with the resources? Without me, you think you could have gotten this far with just your pretty face and no background? Watching Peter's face go red and white with embarrassment, I didn't mind twisting the knife a little further. Guess why Nancy just now pulled your resources? Because I'm back. She wanted to show she's genuine to me, which is why she's getting back at you now. Peter, you think you only pissed me off? Don't forget about Nancy. To her, I'm the most important one. I chuckled, feeling a wicked sense of satisfaction. Sure, Peter probably figured out the truth. But when I said it so proudly to his face, he couldn't hide his jealous, nasty stare. Oh, don't be mad. This is just the beginning. The real drama's still to come. I signaled the security standing by. What are you waiting for? Go ahead, throw him out. Security stepped in, each grabbing one of Peter's arms, and tossed him out. Of course, the paparazzi at the door caught it all on their live stream. And the next second, it blew up on social media. People used to see how close Peter and I were, how much I backed him. Peter's fans were so proud, always showing off. But now it was clear as day that Peter and I had cut ties. What happened? What's going on? Yeah, Peter got thrown out of the birthday party. Are they really done with each other? Gut feeling says this isn't simple. Nope, it's not simple. Because soon, everyone noticed Peter's opportunities were dwindling fast. Projects he was working on suddenly replaced him. Endorsements he negotiated got handed to others. Speculations ran wild among netizens about what went down. Overnight, Peter's status in the entertainment industry plummeted. Of course, all this info was relayed to me by Nancy through someone else. It was like she was really trying to show me she regretted and felt sorry. And when Harry had his birthday, the media snapped pictures of Nancy doting on me the whole time. Online, people praised our deep connection. What's with fake celeb couples when you've got real power couples like us? Exactly. Two strong people, childhood sweethearts, perfectly matched. Who even gets the worth of a reformed bad boy? It's straight out of a novel. This actually bumped up the company's stock a bit more. Nancy seemed to enjoy those viral videos from the marketing accounts and even secretly boosted some. I just saw it all as one big joke. Watching Peter struggle made even Nancy seem a bit more likable to me. A few days later, Nancy suddenly asked me to a show. She seemed a little nervous when she asked. When I nodded, she let out a sigh of relief and smiled. But halfway through the show, Nancy's phone kept lighting up. Then her secretary came over, frowning, and whispered something in her ear. Nancy's face quickly turned serious. Tim, I need to handle something and step out for a bit. It was rare to see Nancy look so upset. I watched her hurry away and picked up my phone. Turned out something did happen. Peter posted a long message and video online. He wrote, "Thank you all for your concern during this time, and I apologize for taking up public resources. About the rumors online regarding Nancy and me, I want to respond. Nancy and I stopped being friends a long time ago because he suspected something inappropriate between her and me." Peter explained his recent troubles as my revenge against him. In the post, he hinted I was a jealous guy. He thought Nancy gave Peter special treatment because the company heavily favored him. Nancy and I have always been close partners. Sure, I've been a bit infatuated, but that's not why Nancy would take revenge on me, because they divorced 3 years ago. Then Peter shared a video and a photo of a divorce agreement. The video shows a messy hospital room. I'm there, red-eyed and angry. "Nancy, we're divorcing." The figure with her back to the camera in the video was clearly Nancy. And that photo was the divorce agreement I signed when I left. I felt disoriented. I played the video back several times, until suddenly it showed video failed to load. Nancy acted. Peter's post got taken down. But she underestimated internet users. People already screenshotted and saved everything. Peter's fans felt deeply humiliated, angrily flooding the company's social media. "Is this really your boss lady? You're doomed. Does your boss lady overreact because a male artist does too well? Divorced yet acting like a loving couple. Did Peter deserve to be part of your mess? Tim, you bastard. Go to hell." Some fans even started attacking me personally. The PR team worked overnight, but the topic stayed hot online for days. People even called my phone. Worse, someone dug into my previous dance troupe. Even my dance buddies got caught in the mess. "Tim, are you all right?" Becky didn't really know the situation, but she still tried to set things straight for me. But she's not very influential. She could only ask me nervously in the end. "I'm fine, sorry for dragging you guys into this. I'll handle it." But actually, I'm not fine. From the moment I saw the video, my head throbbed in pain. Hanging up didn't help. Harry looked at me, anxious and scared. Afraid the rumors would affect him, we didn't let him go to school. Now he approached me with tear-filled eyes. "Dad, did you really divorce Mom?" Harry sure looked like Nancy, but I always felt he resembled someone else too. If only he could have been born under normal circumstances. I let out a cold, ironic laugh. "Yeah, I went abroad because I didn't want your mom or you." Harry's tears flowed even more. "Why? Why do you think?" "Because I stopped loving her. When I first discovered Nancy was having an affair with Peter, my entire body shook with pain. I only remember a nauseating tightness in my stomach, accompanied by sharp, stabbing discomfort. Nancy's face was pale and shocked. That situation laid me up for a month. When I woke, Nancy sat by my bed. Her eyes dark, hair messy, and eyebrows unkempt. She looked desperate. "Tim." Seeing me awake made her both thrilled and worried. But I felt waves of nausea. I threw anything I could reach at Nancy, screaming at her. "Why? Why did you do this to me?" Nancy stood there, not dodging, letting me vent. In the end, I said, "Nancy, we're divorcing." Her eyes immediately reddened, full of agony as she looked at me. "No, Tim." After leaving the hospital, I moved out of the villa. Nancy tried numerous times to find me, but all I could say to her was one thing: sign the papers. Nancy couldn't listen anymore, eventually choosing to avoid me. A month later, she suddenly appeared in Peter's social media. That day was Harry's birthday. I intended to return home to celebrate with him, but couldn't find him. Peter posted, "At this moment, I am the happiest person alive." In the picture, Harry was hugged by him and Nancy. Under a dazzling aurora, they looked like a perfect family of 3. That night, I left a divorce agreement behind and moved abroad alone. During my time abroad, I suffered from severe depression. In my darkest moments, I attempted suicide by cutting my wrist. Not succeeding after the first cut, I slashed again. But I didn't die. I was saved by the girl next door. "You've died once. From now on, you're reborn," she said in broken Mandarin. She spent that entire winter by my side. That girl was Becky. Harry didn't understand what suicide meant. He just cried his heart out repeatedly. And I looked up indifferently, spotting Nancy standing at the doorway, back without me noticing. Her expression was just like that day at the airport when we reunited. She was shocked to see me. Then suddenly her eyes turned red, and she lost her composure. Nancy and I didn't say a word to each other. After that day, Nancy disappeared again. The news was that she was handling Peter's situation at the company. She wanted desperately to fix things between us, trying to mend the cracks carefully. But Peter messed things up, ruining her efforts completely. She went after Peter almost like revenge, suppressing him hard. Peter was an artist under her, and she had dirt on him, whether big or small. And if there wasn't any, Nancy would make some up. Soon, a lot of negative stuff about Peter came to light. And on top of that, an anonymous video surfaced, pushing Peter into hell. The video showed Peter's countless infamous deeds from childhood onwards. At 18, he got a classmate pregnant, was isolated by his peers, and borrowed money from others for an abortion. It was the year I met him. He begged me not to tell anyone, saying it'd ruin his life. I felt sorry for him and lent him money. Peter helped me out with many things in return, and we became best friends. At 19, to win a competition, he secretly put nails in a rival's dance shoes, causing them to fall and miss the competition. He claimed it was luck winning first place. At 20, he entered the entertainment industry and slept with directors and writers for leading roles. Afterward, he cried to me, claiming he was coerced, and I threw a lot of resources into him so he wouldn't be bullied in the industry. And so much more. Peter played the pitiful perfect act in front of me. I was blind to it all. Looking back, I realized I never truly saw him. After the video was released, public opinion flipped. Previously supportive fans, after knowing his true self, created a spectacle of unfollowing and backlash. Peter was done for. The officials jumped on this, issuing a statement, saying Peter's claims were pure defamation and legal action was underway. Nancy shared the announcement, adding, "Tim is my only husband." A week later, the curtain closed on this dramatic scene. Peter vanished online. The world quieted, until one day, Harry disappeared. At the same time, I got a call from Peter. "Tim, I've got your son. Meet me and I'll let him go." Of course, I didn't meet him. I called the police right away. An hour later, Harry was rescued, clutching my neck and crying in fear. Peter was arrested. Hatred filled his eyes. "Tim, you win." I let Harry go and walked over to Peter. I gave him 2 hard slaps, so fast even the police couldn't stop me. By the time they reacted, I had grabbed Peter's hair, pulling hard. Peter screamed in pain. "Peter, those slaps, one from me, one from my son. I've done nothing wrong to you, but what you've done, 10 slashes wouldn't satisfy my anger." Peter sneered. "Tim, if you hadn't told my classmates about my affair, would I have been isolated? You befriended me just to see me grovel like a lapdog. You're no different from them, looking down on me." Finally, I understood. Peter had hated me for a long time. He stared straight at me, uttering each word. "Truth is, Tim, I slept with Nancy a long time ago." Peter's malicious smile was like a final blow meant to bring me down. I paused for a moment, then calmly said, "Believe it or not, I never told anyone about your pregnancy issue." Peter froze. Nancy hired the best legal team with one request. She never wanted to see Peter again. Peter got detained and sentenced. Heard that the trial was live-streamed nationwide. It was practically a social death. After things settled, Nancy sighed with relief. Yet she still couldn't face me, terrified I'd mention divorce if we stayed together too long. Later, Harry wanted to visit the amusement park. He'd just gone through a kidnapping. To soothe his trauma, I agreed. Nancy cleared a day to join us. But on the way to the park, a car ran a red light. Nancy swerved to avoid it, crashing into the greenery. Thankfully, it wasn't serious. I was fine. Harry was fine. But Nancy wasn't. To check for any crash aftereffects, the hospital ran a series of tests. Nancy only had a mild concussion, but they found out she had HIV. When the doctor delivered the news, Nancy's parents were there. Her mother cried out in agony, collapsing from the shock. Her father, composed and strong, instructed the doctors to draft a treatment plan ASAP. I stood in the hallway, looking through the glass at Nancy, lying on the bed lifeless and dull. I walked in. She was leaning against the bedhead. What once were beautiful, bright features were now lifeless. Her face pale and fragile. She managed a weak smile when she saw me. "Tim, do you think this is karma?" Nancy began treatment, but we knew the reality. With her family's resources, they could only ensure she'd pass without much pain. I went back to the villa. Harry hadn't realized what happened, thinking his mom was just busy. 2 months later, I got a call from Nancy's lawyer. "Hey Tim, it's Nancy's attorney." In the hospital room, the lawyer handed me and Nancy a divorce agreement. "This is what Nancy asked me to draft," he said. "After the divorce, you'll get 20% of Nancy's shares, plus there's a list of properties, cars, stocks, and funds." I glanced at Nancy. She looked weaker than the last time I saw her 2 months ago. It's kind of funny. Before, she didn't want a divorce. Now that she's about to die, she's agreed. I looked down at the agreement in my hand. I wasn't going to sign it. The room went silent, and Nancy looked up at me. "Why? Haven't you always wanted a divorce from me?" "Yeah, I did. I wanted to get away from Nancy for a long time. But now that she's dying, what's the point in running?" I turned to the lawyer. "Can you leave us for a bit? I have something to say to her." After the lawyer stepped out, it was just me and Nancy in the room. "You know why I won't sign those divorce papers?" I continued. "You think I'm hesitant?" "Nah, I hate you. More than anyone, I wish you'd die." She thought I'd go soft because she decided to change late in the game? Not after everything I've been through. Ever since she forced me to come back to the country, I've been plotting my revenge. Didn't expect her to get sick and be the one to go first. So now she's trying to be nice, giving me just 20% of the shares? Who cares? If Nancy dies, I become her rightful heir. I get more. Does she think her last-minute generosity would lead to my forgiveness? No. I'll hurt her before she goes. I hate Nancy. She met my gaze. Even if you could get back at me, what's there to fear from someone who's nearly dead? I was done talking. Nancy's gaze trembled, and she realized I meant every word. Then, with effort, she spoke, her eyes carrying both restraint and deep feeling. "Tim, I won't retaliate. I love you." I laughed coldly. "Oh? Love? The more you talk, the less I believe it, Nancy. I've known you for years, but never sensed it." That was the last time I saw Nancy. Her parents shielded the news, avoiding stock market fears. 2 months later, the hospital called. Nancy was done for. This time, the room was crowded, including that same lawyer. He read Nancy's will aloud. She was unconscious, kept alive with IVs and oxygen. In the will, Nancy left 60% of her shares to Tim, 20% to her son Harry, with me managing until Harry turned 18. I didn't expect Nancy to change her will. The silence in the room was only broken by the lawyer's formal voice. Right after he finished, Nancy's heart monitor beeped twice, then went flat. Soft sobs filled the room. Heads bowed. Everyone mourned. I watched as they draped a sheet over Nancy's face, hiding my emotions. After Nancy passed, Harry was taken by her parents to their family home, meant to be the next heir. He clung to my leg, refusing to go. "Dad, are you leaving me?" He didn't grasp the concept of goodbye, but on the day of Nancy's burial, he seemed to sense something. Now he had to leave me. Harry's tears cut into me like needles. I finally knelt down and hugged him. No, but I couldn't take him with me. Nancy's parents needed him now, and it was the best place for him to be. I'd lived decades, perfect as a son and husband, but as a father, I felt I owed Harry so much. "I'll always love you, but I need to love myself too." Nancy's epilogue. I always knew Tim had feelings for me. When I was 18, his friend Peter confronted me. "Nancy, don't you have a heart? You're trampling on someone's feelings." I was clueless then. Peter's accusations revealed that Tim liked me back then. On my birthday, he'd given me a thoughtful gift. But to avoid jealousy from my then boyfriend, I tossed it. Tim and I practically grew up together, our families well matched, with ties going way back. Everyone assumed he'd be my future husband. But I never felt much for Tim. He was so dull. His life seemed dedicated to marrying me. He learned etiquette, followed high society rules. His every move seemed meticulously crafted. I was bold by nature, and Tim's blandness wasn't appealing. But then, at a new students' event, Tim's dance swept the room off its feet. Girls from all sides declared they'd chase him, only to be told that we had a childhood betrothal. Some came to ask if it was true. Get lost. I don't like him. That engagement stuff is just a joke. I brushed them off. So young and proud, childhood engagements were ridiculous to me. Really? If you're out, can I go for it? Someone enthused. In that moment, a confused ache rose in me. Words formed in my throat, but all I tasted was bitterness. The girl was serious, publicly confessing at a club dinner party. Tim was caught off guard, standing among candles, clearly uncomfortable. He didn't like her, that much was obvious. Such a scene made him feel awkward and threatened. Tim kept looking my way, hoping I'd bail him out. Back then, when he looked over at me, his eyes were like a pool of autumn water, misty and soft. My heart skipped a beat, but I pretended I didn't care and looked away. Tim looked down, disappointed. In the end, he didn't agree to that girl's confession. The moment I heard him turn her down, I felt relieved. Tim had never dated anyone before. He was always such a good boy growing up. Even as he got older, he stuck to the rules. Some even said he was saving himself for me. They admired him and couldn't help but chatter about it. They'd say it was something that Nancy was so captivating, guys kept coming, but she had a devoted one waiting at home. I'd laugh it off and shrug it off, but deep down I was happy when people said Tim was head over heels for me. A few years passed, and our families started talking about marriage between me and Tim. What do you think about that boy from the Sioux family? If you don't like him, we're not going through with it. My family knew my free-spirited ways all too well. Watching me go through one boyfriend after another, they finally asked. I smirked. Yeah, I'll marry him. Why not? Tim's actually pretty good. When my friends heard about my engagement to Tim, they were really surprised. I thought you planned on being a free bird your whole life. I can't believe you're getting married, and to Tim no less. He was both shocked and curious. Well, is Tim okay marrying a wild girl like you? Why wouldn't he be? I boasted. I've been wild for a few years, but for the next decades, I'll be all his. I was shameless, dreaming of a loving and sweet life with Tim. But I forgot. I had faked it for so long, I didn't know how to truly give my heart. Tim was a perfect husband, but I'd been too wild for too long, and I couldn't reel it back. At first, when I cheated, I felt guilty and awful. But then I started noticing that Tim didn't really seem to care. Maybe, for him, just being my husband was enough. And so it went, one after another, until during Tim's illness, Peter ended up in my bed. At first, I was scared and anxious too. But who could really know in the shadows? I secretly congratulated myself, tormented and thrilled. I even thought, even if it all came out, Tim would still forgive me. After all, he'd liked me for so many years. But 3 years later, as I lay on my deathbed, awaiting the end, I realized his love for me had been worn down, bit by bit over the years of disappointment, turning into hate. When I died, he didn't shed a single tear. He just stood among the crowd, indifferently, staring at me without expression. Yet I distinctly remembered that first year we were married. He'd cook dinner and wait for me to come home from work. The joy he'd have when he saw me then, pulling me into a hug. Nancy, you're back.